Chapter 4 of Gray Lensman by E. Smith. Chapter 4. For a moment all eyes were fixed apprehensively upon meters and recorders, but there was no immediate cause for alarm. The builders of the Dauntless had builded well. Her outer screens, the lightest of her series of 4, was carrying the attacker's load with no sign of distress. "Strap down, everybody," the expedition's commander ordered then. "Inert her, Hen. Match velocity with that base." And as master pilot Henry Henderson cut his Bergenholm, the vessel lurched wildly aside as its intrinsic velocity was restored. Henderson's fingers swept over his board as rapidly and as surely as those of an organist over the banked keys of his console, producing not chords and arpeggios of harmony, but roaring blasts of precisely controlled power. Each key-like switch controlled one jet. Lightly and fleetingly touched, it produced a gentle urge. At sharp, full contact, it yielded a mighty, solid shove. Depressed still farther, so as to lock into any one of a dozen notches, it brought into being a torrent of propulsive force of any desired magnitude, which ceased only when the key release was touched. And Henderson was a virtuoso. Smoothly, effortlessly, but in a space of seconds, the great vessel rolled over, spiraled, and swung until her landing jets were in line and exerting 5 gravities of thrust. Then, equally smoothly, almost imperceptibly, the line of force was varied until the flame-enshrouded dome was stationary below them. Nobody, not even the 2 other master pilots, and least of all Henderson himself, paid any attention to the polished perfection, the consummate artistry of the performance. That was his job. He was a master pilot, and one of the hallmarks of his rating was the habit of making difficult maneuvers look easy. "Take 'em now, Chief? Can't we, huh?" Chatway, the chief firing officer, did not say those words. He did not need to. The attitude and posture of the CFO and his subordinates made the thought tensely plain. "Not yet, Chatty," the lensman answered the unsent thought. "We'll have to wait until they englobe us, so that we can get them all. It's got to be all or none. If even one of them gets away, or even has time to analyze and report on the stuff we're going to use, it'll be just too bad." He then got in touch with the officer within the beleaguered base and renewed the conversation at the point at which it had been broken off. "We can help you, I think, but to do so effectively we must have clear ether. Will you please order your ships away out of even extreme range?" "For how long?" "They can do us irreparable damage in one rotation of the planet. 1/20th of that time, at most. If we cannot do it in that time, we cannot do it at all. Nor will they direct many beams at you, if any. They will be working on us." Then, as the defending ship darted away, Kinnison turned to his CFO. "QX, Chatty. Open up with your secondaries. Fire at will." Then, from projectors of a power theretofore carried only by maulers, there raved out against the nearest Boskonian vessels beams of a vehemence compared to which the enemy's own seemed weak, futile. And those were the secondaries. As has been intimated, the Dauntless was an unusual ship. She was enormous. She was bigger even than a mauler in actual bulk and mass, and from needle-beaked prow to jet-studded stern, she was literally packed with power. Power for any emergency conceivable to the fertile minds of Port Admiral Haynes and his staff of designers and engineers. Instead of 2 or at most 3 intake screen exciters, she had 200. Her bus bars, instead of being the conventional rectangular coppers of a few square inches cross-sectional area, were laminated members built up of coaxial tubing of pure silver to a diameter of over a yard, multiple and parallel conductors, each of whose current carrying capacity was to be measured only in millions of amperes. And everything else aboard that mighty engine of destruction was upon the same gargantuan scale. Titanic though those thrusts were, not a pirate ship was seriously hurt. Outer screens went down, and more than a few of the secondary lines of defense also failed. But that was the patrolman's strategy. to let the enemy know that they had weapons of offense somewhat superior to their own, but not quite powerful enough to be a real menace. In minutes, therefore, the Boskonians rushed up and englobed the newcomer, supposing, of course, that she was the product of the world below, that she was manned by the race who had so long and so successfully fought off Boskonian encroachment. They attacked, and under the concentrated fury of their beams, the outer screen of the patrol ship began to fail. Higher and higher into the spectrum it radiated, blinding white, blue, and intolerable violet glare, then, patchily, through the invisible ultraviolet and into the black of extinction. The second screen resisted longer and more stubbornly, but finally it also went down, the third automatically taking up the burden of defense. Simultaneously, the power of civilization's projectors weakened, as though the Dauntless were shifting her power from offense to defense in order to stiffen her third and supposedly her last shielding screen. "Pretty soon now, Chataway," Kinnison observed. "Just as soon as they can report that they have us in a bad way, that it is just a matter of time until they blow us out of the ether. They'll report now. I'll put you on the spool." "We are equipped to energize simultaneously 8 of the new replaceable unit primary projectors," the CFO stated crisply. "There are 21 vessels englobing us, and no others within detection. With a discharge period of 0.60 second and a switching interval of 0.09, the entire action should occupy 1.98 seconds. Chief Communications Officer Nelson on the spool. Can the last surviving ship of the enemy report enough in 2 seconds to do us material harm?" "In my opinion, it cannot, sir," Nelson reported formally. The communications officer is neither an observer nor a technician. He merely transmits whatever material is given him by other officers for transmission. If he is already working a beam to his base at the moment of our first blast, he might be able to report the destruction of vessels, but he could not be specific as to the nature of the agent used. Such a report could do no harm, as the fact of the destruction of the vessels will in any event become apparent shortly. Since we are apparently being overcome easily, however, and this is a routine action, the probability is that this detachment is not in direct communication with base at any given moment. If not, he could not establish working control in 2 seconds. Kinnison now reporting. "Having determined to the best of my ability that engaging the enemy at this time will not enable them to send Boskone any information regarding our primary armament, I now gives the word to fire." The underlying principle of the destructive beam produced by overloading a regulation projector had, it is true, been discovered by a Boskonian technician. Insofar as Boskonia was concerned, however, the secret had died with its inventor, since the pirates had at that time no headquarters in the first galaxy. And the patrol had had months of time in which to perfect it, for that work had begun before the last of Helmuth's guardian fortress had been destroyed. The projector was not now fatal to its crew, since they were protected from the lethal back radiation not only by shields of force, but also by foot after impenetrable foot of lead, osmium, carbon, and paraffin. The refractories were of neocargalloy, backed and permeated by MKR fields. The radiators were constructed of the most ultimately resistant materials known to the science of the age. But even so, the unit had a useful life of but little over half a second, so frightful was the overload at which it was used. Like a rifle cartridge, it was good for only 1 shot. Then it was thrown away to be replaced by a new unit. Those problems were relatively simple of solution. Switching those enormous energies was the great stumbling block. The old Kimberling block dispersal circuit breaker was prone to arc over under loads much in excess of 100 billion kilowatts, hence could not even be considered in this new application. However, the patrol force finally succeeded in working out a combination of the immersed antenna and the semi-permeable condenser types, which they called the Thorndike heavy-duty switch. It was cumbersome, of course. Any device to interrupt voltages and amperages of the really astronomical magnitude in question could not at that time be small. But it was positive, fast-acting, and reliable. At Kinnison's word of command, 8 of those indescribable primary beams lashed out, stilettos of irresistible penetrant energy which not even a Q-type helix could withstand. Through screens, through wall screens, and through metal they hurtled in a space of time almost too brief to be measured. Then, before each beam expired, it was swung a little so that the victim was literally split apart or carved into sections. Performance exceeded by far that of the hastily improvised weapon which had so easily destroyed the heavy cruisers of the patrol. In fact, it checked out almost exactly with the theoretical figures of the designers. As the first 8 beams winked out, 8 more came into being, then 5 more, and meanwhile the mighty secondaries were sweeping the heavens with full aperture cones of destruction. Metal meant no more to those rays than did organic material. Everything solid or liquid whiffed into vapor and disappeared. The Dauntless lay alone in the sky of that new world. Marvelous! Wonderful! The thought beat into Kinnison's brain as soon as he re-established rapport with the beings so far below. We've just recalled our ships. Will you please come down to our spaceport at once so that we can put into execution a plan which has been long in preparation? As soon as your ships are down, the Tellurian acquiesced. No sooner, as your landing conventions are doubtless very unlike our own, and we do not wish to cause disaster. Give me the word when your field is entirely clear. That word came soon, and Kinnison nodded to the pilots. Once more inertialess, the Dauntless shot downward, deep into atmosphere before her inertia was restored. Rematching velocity this time was a simple matter, and upon the towering, powerfully resilient pillars of her landing jets, the inconceivable mass of the Tellurian ship of war settled toward the ground, as lightly seeming as a wafted thistledown. Their cradles wouldn't fit us, of course, even if they were big enough, which they aren't by half, Schermerhorn commented. Where do they want us to put her? Anywhere, they say, the lensman answered, but we don't want to take that too literally. Without a solid dock, she'll make an awful hole wherever we set her down. Won't hurt her any, she's designed for it. We couldn't expect to find cradles to fit her anywhere except on Tellus. I'd say to lay her down on her belly over there in that corner, out of the way, as close to that big hangar as you can work without blasting it out with your jets. As Kinnison had intimated, the lightness of the vessel was indeed only seeming. Superbly and effortlessly the big boat seeped downward into the designated corner, but when she touched the pavement she did not stop. Still easily and without jar or jolt she settled, a full 20 feet into the concrete reinforcing steel and hard-packed earth of the field before she came to a halt. What a monster! Who are they? Where could they have come from? Kinnison caught a confusion of startled thoughts as the real size and mass of the visitor became apparent to the natives. Then again came the clear thought of the officer. We would like very much to have you and as many possible of your companions come to confer with us as soon as you have tested our atmosphere. Come in spacesuits if you must. The air was tested and found suitable. True, it did not match exactly that of Tellus, or Rigel 4, or Valencia. But then neither did that of the Dauntless, since that gaseous mixture was a compromised one and mostly artificial to boot. Warsaw, Tregonsi, and I will go to this conference, Kinnison decided. The rest of you, sit tight. I don't need to tell you to keep on your toes, that anything is apt to happen, anywhere, without warning. Keep your detectors full out and keep your noses clean. Be ready, like the good little endeavorers you are, to do with all your might what your hands find to do. Come on, fellows. And the 3 lensmen strode, wriggled, and waddled across the field, to and into a spacious room of the administration building. Strangers, or should I say friends, I introduce you to Wise, our president, Kinnison's acquaintance said, clearly enough, although it was plain to all 3 lensmen that he was shocked at the sight of the Earthman's companions. I am informed that you understand our language, the president began doubtfully. He, too, was staring at Tregonsi and Warsaw. He had been told that Kinnison, and therefore supposed the rest of the visitors, were beings fashioned more or less after his own pattern. But these 2 creatures... for they were not even remotely human in form. Tregonsi, the Rigelian, with his leathery, multi-appendaged, oil drum-like body, his immobile dome of a head, and his 4 blocky pillars of legs, must at first sight have appeared fantastic indeed. And Warsaw, the Valencian, was infinitely worse. He was repulsive, a thing materialized from sheerest nightmare, a leather-winged, crocodile-headed, crooked-armed, 30-foot-long, pythonish reptilian monstrosity. But the president of Medon saw at once that which the 3 outlanders had in common: the lenses, each glowing aflame with its own innate pseudo-vitality. Kinnison's clamped to his brawny wrist by a band of iridium osmium tungsten alloy, Tregonsi's embedded in the glossy black flesh of one mighty sensuous arm, Warsaw's apparently driven deep and with cruel force into the horny scaly hide squarely in the middle of his forehead, between 2 of his weirdly stalked, repulsively extensible eyes. It is not your language we understand, but your thoughts, by virtue of these our lenses, which you have already noticed. The president gasped as Kinnison bulleted the information into his mind. Go ahead. Just a minute. As an unmistakable sensation swept through his being. We've gone free. The whole planet, I perceive. In that respect, at least, you are in advance of us. As far as I know, no scientist of any of our races has even thought of a Bergenholm big enough to free a world. It was long in the designing, many years in the building of its units, Wise replied. We are leaving this sun in an attempt to escape from our enemy and yours, Boskone. It is our only chance of survival. The means have long been ready, but the opportunity which you have just made for us is the first that we have had. This is the first time in many, many years that not a single Boskonian vessel is in position to observe our flight. Where are you going? Surely the Boskonians will be able to find you if they wish. That is possible, but we must run that risk. We must have a respite or perish. After a long lifetime of continuous warfare, our resources are at the point of exhaustion. There is a part of this galaxy in which there are very few planets, and of those few none are inhabited or habitable. Since nothing is to be gained, ships seldom or never go there. If we can reach that region undetected, the probability is that we shall be unmolested long enough to recuperate. Kinnison exchanged flashing thoughts with his 2 fellow lensmen, then turned again to Wise. We come from a neighboring galaxy, he informed them, and pointed out to his mind just which galaxy he meant. You are fairly close to the edge of this one. Why not move over to ours? You have no friends here, since you think that yours may be the only remaining independent planet. We can assure you of friendship. We can also give you some hope of peace, or at least semi-peace, in the near future, for we are driving Boskonia out of our galaxy. What you think of as semi-peace would be tranquility incarnate to us, the old man replied with feeling. We have, in fact, considered long that very move. We decided against it for 2 reasons. First, because we knew nothing about conditions there, and hence might be going from bad to worse. And second, and more important, because of lack of reliable data upon the density of matter in intergalactic space. Lacking that, we could not estimate the time necessary for the journey, and we could have no assurance that our sources of power, great as they are, would be sufficient to make up for the heat lost by radiation. We have already given you an idea of conditions, and we can give you the data you lack. They did so, and for a matter of minutes the Medonians conferred. Meanwhile, Kinnison went on a mental expedition to one of the power plants. He expected to see super-colossal engines, bar buses 10 feet thick, perhaps cooled in liquid helium, and other things in proportion. But what he actually saw made him gasp for breath and called Tregonsi's attention. The Rigelian sent out his sense of perception with Kinnison's, and he also was almost stunned. "What's the answer, Trig?" the Earthman asked finally. "This is more down your alley than mine. That motor's about the size of my foot, and if it isn't eating 1,000 pounds an hour, I'm Clono's maiden aunt. and the whole output is going out on 2 wires no bigger than number 4 jacketed together like ordinary parallel pair. Perfect insulator? If so, how about switching? That must be it. A substance of practically infinite resistance, the Rigelian replied absently, studying intently the peculiar mechanism. Must have a better conductor than a silver too, unless they can handle voltages of 10 to the 15th or so, and don't see how they could break such potentials. Guess they don't use switches. Don't see any. Must shut down the prime sources. No, there it is. So small that I overlooked it completely. In that little box there. Sort of a jam plate type, a thin sheet of insulation with a knife on the leading edge, working in a slot to cut the 2 conductors apart. Kills the arc by jamming into the tight slot at the end of the box. The conductors must fuse together at each make and burn away a little at each break. That's why they have renewable tips. Kim, they've really got something. I certainly am going to stay here and do some studying. Yes, and we'll have to rebuild the Dauntless. The 2 lensmen were called away from their study by Warsaw. The Mendanians had decided to accept the invitation to attempt to move to the first galaxy. Orders were given, the course was changed, and the planet, now a veritable spaceship, shot away in the new direction. Not as many legs as a speedster, of course, but at that she's no slouch. We're making plenty of lights, Kinnison commented, then turned to the president. It seems rather presumptuous for us to call you simply Wise, especially as I gather that is not really your formal name. That is what I am called, and that is what you are to call me, the Ulster replied. We of Medon do not have names. Each has a number, or rather a symbol, composed of numbers and letters of our alphabet, a symbol which gives his full classification. Since these things are too clumsy for regular use, however, each of us is given a nickname, usually an adjective which is supposed to be more or less descriptive. You of Earth we could not give a complete symbol. Your 2 companions we could not give any at all. However, you may be interested in knowing that you 3 have already been named. Very much so. You are to be called Keen. He of Rigel 4 is Strong, and he of Valencia is Agile. Quite complimentary to me, but not bad at all, I'd say, Dragoncy broke in. But hadn't we better be getting on with more serious business? We should indeed, Wise agreed. We have much to discuss with you, particularly the weapon you used. Could you get an analysis of it? Kinnison asked sharply. No 1 beam was in operation long enough. However, a study of the recorded data, particularly the figure for intensity, figures so high as to be almost unbelievable, lead us to believe that the beam is the result of an enormous overload upon a projector, otherwise of more or less conventional type. Some of us have wondered why we did not think of the idea ourselves. So did we when it was used on us, Kinnison grinned, and went off to explain the origin of the primary. But before we go into details, I noticed that your fixed mount stuff could not work effectively through atmosphere. We have what we call Q-type helixes, with which we encase such beams so that they work in a tube of vacuum. We will give you the Q formulae and also the working hookup, including the protective devices, because they're mighty dangerous without plenty of force backing, of the primaries in exchange for some lessons in power plant design. Such an exchange of knowledge would be helpful indeed, Wise agreed. The Boskonians know nothing whatever of this beam, and we do not want them to learn of it, Kinnison cautioned. Therefore I have 2 suggestions to make. First, that you try everything else before you use this primary beam. Second, that you don't use it even then unless you can wipe out, as nearly simultaneously as we did out there, every Boskonian who may be able to report back to his base as to what really happened. Fair enough? Eminently so. We agree without reservation. It is to our interest as much as yours that such a secret be kept from Boskone. QX, fellow. Let's go back to the ship for a couple of minutes." Then aboard the Dauntless. "Dragoncy, you and your crew want to stay with the planet to show the Mendonians what to do and to help them along generally, as well as to learn about their power system. Thorndyke, you and your gang, and probably Lensman Hotchkiss, had better study these things too. You'll know what you want as soon as they show you the hookup. Worsel, I'd like to have you stay with the ship. You're in command of her until further orders. Keep her here for, say, a week or 10 days, until the planet is well out of the galaxy. Then, if Hotchkiss and Thorndyke haven't got all the dope they want, leave them here to ride back with Dragoncy on the planet and drill the Dauntless for Tellus. Keep yourself more or less disengaged for a while and sort of keep tuned to me. I may not need an ultra-long-range communicator, but you never can tell." "Why such comprehensive orders, Kim?" asked Hotchkiss. "Who ever heard of a commander abandoning his expeditions? Aren't you sticking around?" "Nope. Got to do a flit. Think maybe I'm getting an idea. Break out my speedster, will you, Allardyce?" And the Gray Lensman was gone. End of Chapter 4.